Alright, guys, I'm in DC, and one of the most important things you can do for your career is practice. And so I'm going to do a practice round in the field of cloud computing so you guys can understand how it is like to actually interview in a real life scenario for cloud computing. So now let's do cloud computing, and Azure or AWS are both, and GCP as well, are both huge critical keys in the cloud computing space. So let's just try AWS. That's a huge component of being a DevOps engineer, and dealing with these computing kind of roles. So let's do random, and let's use a timer because it's super critical to have a timer to track everything, and basically simulate the real life scenario. So we can use a timer. Let's get started.
Hi, let's practice an interview for AWS Cloud Engineer. Describe the process of cloud workload optimization and resource right-sizing.
So the process of cloud workload optimization is basically optimizing your storage, how much capacity each instance will have, each server will have, because as well as the memory, because then you can optimize efficient workload balance, and process timing when a component renders for the application, and basically also adjusting memory allocation as needed.
Lastly, what are some of the new services or features in AWS that excite you, and how do you plan to incorporate them in your work?
Yeah, so there's many new AI features that AWS has, like Textract and all that super excite me, and it's really critical to keep up to pace with all these new features because they're always releasing them, and yeah, that's how you stay up to par.
Your company wants to implement a data lake architecture for storing and analyzing large volumes of structured and unstructured data. How would you design and implement the data lake using AWS services such as Amazon S3, AWS Glue, and Amazon Athena?
All right, let me answer this. Should be pretty simple. But yeah, so if your company wants to implement and services like S3, AWS Glue, and Athena, there's a easy component. It should first have a diagram of how these components interact. So if you use S3 buckets, AWS Glue, and Amazon Athena, a component architectural diagram would help. And further, um, basically then listing out the processes, how much compute it would cost, any kind of custom integrations, custom models that needed. Super important to consider all of these things.
A critical database server becomes unresponsive. How do you ensure data integrity and restore service availability?
If a critical database server becomes unresponsive, the first thing you need to do is isolate the condition and check the health and conditional ability of the database. Is it just that it's temporary? Is it a memory issue? Is it some kind of deeper issue? So basically, first have to isolate, diagnose it, if it's staging, if it's production, um, and then adjust memory maybe if needed, um, adjust the kind of the workflow and workload that the database can handle. Maybe you need to shard it, maybe you need to do something else. So it's very important to isolate the condition so you can treat it.
How do you approach risk management and mitigation for AWS projects?
Yeah, so to approach risk mitigation for AWS projects, one thing I would do is basically um, to uh, to keep have many different kind of different segments of servers. So if you have a snapshot of a sort of staging server, staging instance, you also have one of production. You basically back up things from both, have duplicated workflows, all that kind of stuff. Um, and in that instance, you should be pretty set and pretty safe. Alright, guys, I'm submitting. I don't know how I'll do, but let's see. Alright, guys, as you can see with this feedback, there's some things I can work on, like in terms of clarity, relevance, confidence. Had a lot of filler words in there that I can definitely improve, which is critical to understand. Um, I can definitely improve the communication aspects of it, super important. Clarity, architectural overview on Glue S3, got it. So it's super important for me to look at this and keep hammering down on where it could improve. So if I keep doing this over and over, I'll eventually do super well, enough that the hiring manager will say, hey, you're solid. And yeah. Now, as you see, you can always go back and view that in the profile. However, now I will go in and say, how can I become top notch at AWS? So this is a very important question to know because you keep practicing, but you have to sort of transcend that, get to the next level. So they'll be like, wow, you're really good at this. So obviously understanding the fundamentals, keep practicing, and obviously the official training and certification, and obviously practical experience, learning resources, community, super huge. Many people don't talk about it. Working on projects, teaching others. So these are all things that you can obviously do to make yourself really good.